Welcome back, everyone. This video is going to be looking at some of the worries about one's own religious doctrines and traditions that gave rise to the philosophical reflections that we see in the treatise of Yacob and his student Walda Heywat. So in this video, we're going to look at what I'm going to call the problem of religious conflict. And this has to do with these religious persecutions that have occurred throughout history, and how this relates to God as a hypothetical creator of human beings, and an issue known as divine hiddenness or silence. And then this will lead into a discussion very quickly of the problem of evil. And then we will look at what I will call the problem of religious disagreement and diversity. And here, this has to do with religious traditions and the sort of contingency of our religious beliefs. Then we'll also look at the notion of religious diversity and the problem that arises out of the fact that truth is sort of unitary. And then this will lead to what I'll call the sort of problem or argument from religious disagreement. Look, we're all familiar with the fact that religious beliefs have often been motivation for some of history's greatest atrocities. Now, look, I'm not saying that religion has been all bad throughout history at all. Like, there's lots of good things that have come out of religious traditions and ideas. But there's also historical moments that clearly no one ought to ignore that have been sort of morally atrocious. History is no stranger to the fact of religious persecution. So given Jacob's autobiography at the beginning of his Hatata or treatise, it seems he was no stranger to religious persecution either. He says, "I used to meditate for whole days on conflicts between men and their depravity, and on the wisdom of their Creator, who is silent, while men do evil in his name and persecute their fellow men and kill their brothers. For in those days the Catholics prevailed. And not only the Catholics were strong in their persecutions, but my own people were even worse than they. Those who had accepted the faith of the Catholics would say, 'The Copts have denied the rightful see of Peter, and are therefore the enemies of God.' And so they persecuted them. The Copts did the same in defense of their faith." So he sees that both sides are sort of committing these atrocities in the name of their God, in the name of their faith. So Yacob noticed that this poses a challenge insofar as his religious conviction holds that all of humanity was created by God. If God is the guardian of men, how is it that their nature is thus deeply corrupted? And I said, how does God know? Or is there anyone in heaven who knows? So this reflection on this religious conflict, this religious persecution that's being done on all sides, leads Yacob to reflect on, is there really a God? So these conflicts illustrate that the nature of human beings is corrupted. The worry is that if God is the creator of all human beings, then God is the creator of their nature, all of their natures as well. And so if there were a God, then God would be responsible for creating these corrupt natures. So this leads to a critical challenge to the very idea that God exists. So even that fundamental concept to Yacob, this idea that God exists, was something that was subjected to this sort of critical evaluation of his reasoning and observations about the world around him. So interestingly, Yacob also stresses that it isn't merely the corrupt nature of created beings that gives rise to these doubts about God, but it's also the silence or hiddenness of God in response to such evils. So he says, their creator who is silent. So it's not just that these people are doing evil things that serves as the reason causing Yacob to sort of doubt or critically evaluate this belief that God exists. It's the fact that this evil is being done and God is not saying anything, is not revealing himself and condemning these actions. Think of, as an analogy, if my children were to start doing something wrong, I wouldn't want to sort of sit back and just let them do that without saying anything. I would want to come out and sort of speak out against that wrongdoing, and I'd want to tell them, stop doing that. insofar as I sort of sit back and I am silent, I'm sort of complicit in those wrongdoings. Or, if there is one who knows, why does he remain silent on men's depravity while they corrupt his name and act with iniquity in his holy name? So my emphasis here is it's not just the evil, it's the silence of God in response to that evil. This gives rise to what we can call the problem of evil. And I'm going to present this argument in a very basic version that we might develop a little bit further later in the course. But the central idea is, on this hypothesis that a perfect God exists and is the creator of everything, then there just would be no evil. If such a God exists, they'd be all-powerful, they'd have the power to create a perfect world. If they were all good, they'd want to create a perfect world. And if they were sort of all-knowing, they'd know how to create a perfect world. Thus, there would be a perfect world, but as a matter of fact, evil exists. Thus, a perfect God that's the creator of everything does not exist. So the existence of this evil, and in addition, the sort of silence or hiddenness of God that remains in response to this evil, seems to be some reason to criticize or doubt the belief in God. And so, in order to try to respond to this, Yacob says, I said in my prayer, O my Lord and my Creator, who endowed me with reason, make me intelligent, reveal to me your hidden wisdom. Render me intelligent that I may know your precepts. My feet have nearly stumbled, and the ground under them has nearly given way, and the labor stands before me. So these doubts have sort of crept into his mind, given these observations of the world around him. Notice there's a request here, in response to this challenge, for intelligence or reason to provide him with knowledge of God's existence. He doesn't ask for faith. He doesn't ask just to sort of blindly believe. He wants God to give him reason or intelligence to understand how God could exist in light of these facts. And notice Yacob stress that he must do the work or labor to gain his belief back. So there's a strong kind of focus here on a kind of individualism about one's own intellectual autonomy for gaining knowledge. It is his duty to exercise his own reason and to do the work to earn his belief. It's not something that is just given to him by divine grace. All right. Now, the other problem that arises at the beginning of the treatise is the problem of religious diversity. So religious beliefs, such as the belief in a creator God, have been common throughout history. But we're all aware of religious diversity and disagreement. There is Christianity, there is Islam, there is Judaism, there is Hinduism, there is Buddhism, there is Jainism. We can just keep listing all of these religious ideas. And the existence of this disagreement also poses a challenge. To the rationality of religious beliefs. So, Yacob notes, he says, indeed, each one says, my faith is right, and those who believe in another faith believe in falsehood, and are the enemies of God. These days, the Catholics tell us, our faith is right, yours is false. We, on the other hand, tell them, it's not so, your faith is wrong, ours is right. If we also ask the Mohammedans and the Jews, they will claim the same thing. And who would be the judge for such a kind of argument? So notice, we have all these people disagreeing. They're each saying, I'm right, you're wrong. How do we know who's correct? How do we know which faith is true? How can we be the judge? No single human being can judge, for all men are plaintiffs and defendants between themselves. As my faith appears true to me, so does another one find his own faith true. But truth is one. But truth is one, ladies. Only one of these could be true. They can't all be true. Similarly, we see on page 255 of Heywat's treatise, they accepted and believed what they heard from their fathers without inquiry. Hence, the children of Christians are Christians, the children of Mohammedans are Mohammedans, the children of Jews are Jews. There is no reason for their faith other than this. They have heard from childhood that their faith of their parents is true, and they have believed in it without examination or proper knowledge. All fight for their faith, affirming it is the true one. But it's not possible that all the faiths of men be true, because they disagree between themselves. It is possible, however, that all be false, because falsehood is many, but truth is one. Right. So the idea here is it's an appeal to this kind of law of non-contradiction. The idea is two things that contradict one another, they cannot be true. You can't have multiple truths in that way. There can only be a single truth. But there's only one way to be right. But there's infinite ways to be wrong about these sort of religious beliefs. This is a problem that's pretty easy to sort of understand. This is, so some of my first philosophical thoughts as I was growing up were related to my own sort of reflection on religious beliefs that I had sort of grown up with within sort of the traditions that my family and community had. And one of the things that really sort of struck me was exactly this thought. Where did this belief come from? And I thought to myself, look, if I was born halfway around the world in a family of a different religion, I likely would have believed that other religion. This struck me as incredibly worrisome. How could I trust my beliefs, something that seems so important to people's lives and their understanding of themselves? How could I think that I just so happen to be lucky to be born into the family that happened to have the right beliefs, when I could have just as easily just gotten unlucky and been born into a family with the beliefs that I had been taught were wrong? This reflection that one notices about the source of one's own beliefs can be incredibly disconcerting. And it gives rise to what I'm going to call the argument from religious disagreement. The idea is, there are many disagreeing religious views, but most of these faiths must be false, since at most one could be true. As Heywat and Yacob say, truth is one, but falsehood can be many. There's many ways to be wrong. And so, but when we look at how these disagreeing people got their views, it looks like they formed their religious beliefs in very similar ways. So, the Christians believe the things because that's what they were taught in their traditions. The Muslims believe what they believe because that's what they were taught by their parents, by their culture, by their community. Buddhists believe what they believe because that's what they were taught by their community. This sort of passing down of religious traditions amongst our family and culture seems to be the primary way in which these beliefs are propagated. Thus, the way people form their religious beliefs is unreliable because notice, all of these people are using very similar methods for forming their beliefs, but most of those beliefs have to be false since at most one could be true. And if most of them are false, then those methods usually give false beliefs. They are unreliable. But if the way people form their religious beliefs are unreliable, then these beliefs seem to be irrational. Even if one is right, the fact that you know that you got to those beliefs by some unreliable method suggests that you can't trust that belief. Thus, religious beliefs are irrational. Yet again, in reflecting on this, in searching for a solution, Yacob says, while thinking over this matter, I said, O my Creator, wise among the wise and just among the just, who created with me an intelligence, help me understand, for men lack wisdom and truthfulness. As David said, no man can be relied upon. So he says, we need to stop forming these beliefs in this method, and we need to rely on our own reason, our own intellectual autonomy, instead of just trusting what our parents or tradition or culture tells us. Similarly, Heywat says, I do not write what I have heard from the lips of men or what I have received from the doctrines of men, unless it is what I have examined and know to be good. So he says, I'm not just going to repeat what I've been taught since I was young among this religious tradition. I'm not just going to accept someone else's ideas, but rather is going to take those ideas and examine them. But I shall write the things which appear to me to be true after I've examined and know them in the eyes of God, from whom I asked in constant prayers and supplications that he show me the truth and reveal to me his secrets in the way he created man as an intelligent being. And again, as a being that has its own reason, whom he placed among the other creatures which live in this world. So there's these themes. We have these problems that arise from our observations of the world around us. Our reason tells us that there's a sort of worry. But we also have to rely on our reason to get out of the problem. So that's all for this video. In the next video, we're going to look at Yacob and Heywat's attempt to use their reason or intelligence to start sort of digging themselves out of this problem by proving the existence of God, not via sort of the authority of some other figure telling them that God exists, but through their own reason and argument. And they're going to use what's now known as a kind of cosmological argument for God's existence. We'll look at that next time. See you then. Bye-bye.